They vanished from the parks they protected. Imagine a man, a park ranger, in his prime and an expert in his field. He walks out of a visitor center on a routine patrol on a clear afternoon, telling his colleague he'll be back in a couple of hours. He steps onto a trail he's walked 100 times before. And then he's gone. Not just lost or injured. Gone. No footprints, no radio call, no trace that he was ever there. It's a scenario that feels impossible, a contradiction that frightens even the most experienced search and rescue teams. And yet, this is exactly what happened to Park Ranger Paul Fugate. His story, and others like it, force us to confront a deeply unsettling truth. Sometimes, expertise isn't enough. Sometimes, the wilderness has its own set of rules, and it doesn't always tell us what they are. They're the guardians of our wildest places. The experts who know every trail, every peak, and every secret the wilderness holds. We see them in their iconic uniforms, symbols of safety and knowledge, and we trust them. These are the folks who find the lost, rescue the injured, and stand as a thin line between the serene beauty of nature and its unforgiving power. They are masters of their domain. But what happens when the wilderness decides to keep a secret? What happens when the masters themselves simply disappear? This is a look into the chilling cases where the protectors vanished. Seasoned, experienced park rangers and wilderness experts who walked into landscapes they knew like the back of their own hands and were never seen again. Their disappearances defy easy explanation, leaving behind no clues, no answers, and nothing but a string of baffling questions that echo through the canyons and forests they swore to protect. These are the stories of the experts who became the missing, the guardians who became ghosts. Case 1. Paul Fugate, the ranger who walked away from everything. On January 13, 1980, the air in southeastern Arizona's Chiricahua National Monument was crisp and clear. This is a sky island, a breathtaking place where rugged mountains rise dramatically from the desert floor. Its 12,000 acres are a labyrinth of canyons, arroyos, and bizarre, hauntingly beautiful rock formations called hoodoos. Named for the Chiricahua Apache, whose legendary leader Cochise once used this very terrain as a fortress, it is a place of profound beauty, but also one that demands respect. On that Sunday afternoon, 41-year-old Paul Braxton Fugate was the man responsible for this domain. He was a seasoned U.S. park ranger, a naturalist with a biology degree who curated the park's exhibits and wrote its trail guides. He knew the plants, the animals, and the terrain with an intimacy few could match. He was known for being cautious and professional. But Paul was also a bit of a rebel, an anti-authority figure who was once dismissed from the Park Service for having long hair and a handlebar mustache. It was a battle he fought for years and eventually won, being reinstated in 1976. He was a complex man, described by some as a lost soul, perhaps too restless for the quiet life of a monument ranger. Around 2 p.m., Fugate was in the visitor center, the only permanent staff member on duty. He told a seasonal aide he was going for a quick hike to check a trail near the faraway ranch. His instructions were simple. If he wasn't back by 4:30 p.m., she should close up without him. He left his radio, wallet, and keys at the station. He walked out of the visitor center in his green and gray Park Service uniform and stepped into the wilderness he called his office. He was never seen again. When 4:30 p.m. came and went, the aide closed up as instructed. It wasn't until later that evening that the alarm was truly raised. Paul Fugate, the reliable, knowledgeable ranger, was missing. What followed was one of the most extensive and frustrating search operations in the history of the National Park Service. Teams mobilized immediately. The Cochise County Sheriff's Department, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, and specialized rescue groups descended on the monument. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Search dogs were brought in to find a scent. Volunteers, friends, and family combed every square inch of the area. They rappelled into deep crevices and scrambled over rocky ridges. And they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a single clue. No definitive footprints. The few tracks they did find belonged to other searchers. There was no scrap of his uniform, no sign of a struggle, no dropped equipment. The search dogs couldn't pick up a scent trail leading away from the visitor center. It was as if Paul Fugate had become a ghost, swallowed whole by the earth. With no evidence, theories began to swirl. The simplest explanation, an accident, seemed the least likely. Could an experienced ranger on a familiar trail have a fall so perfectly concealed that no trace was ever found? Investigators found the probability of that incredibly low. Searchers are trained to spot the smallest anomaly, a broken branch, a piece of fabric. In Paul's case, the landscape was sterile. Then there was the idea of a voluntary disappearance. Had Paul, a restless soul who'd clashed with superiors, just walked away from his life? This theory quickly fell apart. He'd left everything behind: his wallet, a valuable gun collection, expensive camera gear, and a truck he was restoring. Over $300 in cash was untouched. People who plan to start a new life usually take their money with them. His personal life was also complicated. He was married, but at the time of his disappearance, he had a girlfriend who discovered she was pregnant with his child just days after he vanished. While this adds a layer of personal turmoil, does it point to a man orchestrating such a flawless vanishing act? This leads to the darkest theory, and the one investigators believe is most likely: foul play. From day one, they suspected criminal activity. Chiricahua's remote location made it a known corridor for drug smuggling. Did Ranger Fugate, in his official uniform, stumble upon something he wasn't supposed to see? A drug deal, a hidden cache, something that made him a liability? A former DEA investigator believed this was the scenario. Fugate either confronted smugglers or was somehow involved in a deal gone wrong. This theory is bolstered by a strange, unconfirmed sighting. An acquaintance, Dick Horton, claimed under hypnosis that he saw a pickup truck speeding away from the monument that afternoon. Inside, he said he saw Paul Fugate, slumped unconscious between two men, looking sad and dejected. Others reportedly found spin-out tracks and signs of a scuffle on a dirt road near the faraway ranch, the area Paul was headed. But the lead was dismissed by some as unreliable. For years, the case grew cold. The Park Service's handling of the aftermath was controversial. In 1981, they declared Fugate had abandoned his position, fired him posthumously, and demanded his wife repay the salary she'd been paid since he vanished. The painful decision was reversed in 1986 when the NPS officially confirmed his death. Then, in 2018, nearly 40 years after he vanished, the National Park Service announced they had new, undisclosed information. They tripled the reward to $60,000 and renewed their plea for help. This strongly suggests authorities believe the foul play theory is the right one and that someone, somewhere, still holds the key. The secret, like Paul Fugate himself, remains swallowed by the desert silence. Paul Fugate's case is chilling enough. The total lack of evidence is a statistical improbability that haunts investigators. But what's even more disturbing is that the wilderness has a long history of taking people without a trace. The pattern repeats itself, with experts and innocents alike vanishing from our most beloved national parks. And no case is more foundational to this modern nightmare than that of a little boy who went to play hide-and-seek and simply never stopped hiding. Case 2. Dennis Martin, the ghost of the Smoky Mountains. June 14, 1969. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It was a beautiful Father's Day weekend, and the Martin family was enjoying a traditional camping trip. William Martin, his father, and his two sons, 9-year-old Douglas and 6-year-old Dennis, had hiked to Spence Field, a grassy bald along the Appalachian Trail. Dennis Martin was a quiet, dark-haired 6-year-old. That afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., he and his brother decided to play a classic childhood prank. They would split up, hide in the bushes, and jump out to surprise the adults. Dennis, wearing a bright red t-shirt, disappeared behind a bush. The other children jumped out, their prank a success. But Dennis didn't. His father, William, waited. 5 minutes passed. The other children all returned, but Dennis was still hiding. Concern quickly turned to panic. William Martin started calling his son's name, running up and down the trail. Nothing. The red shirt that made him so visible just moments before was gone. In the few minutes it took to play a game, surrounded by family, Dennis Martin had vanished completely and silently. By 8:30 p.m., the alarm was raised, and what would become the largest search in the park's history began. But their best chance might have already washed away. That night, massive thunderstorms dumped over 2 inches of rain on the area, likely obliterating any small footprints or scent trails. Despite this, the scale of the search was monumental. Over the next few weeks, more than 1,400 people joined the effort, including the National Guard and even elite Green Berets from Fort Bragg. Helicopters searched from the sky while a massive human chain swept 56 square miles of dense forest. Yet, just like with Paul Fugate, they found nothing. Not a scrap of his red shirt. Not a shoelace. Not one of his shoes. There was a brief moment of hope when child-sized barefoot prints were found near a stream, but they were dismissed as likely belonging to a searcher. The tragic case of Dennis Martin would fundamentally change search and rescue protocols, creating the modern system where the first 24 hours are critical and initial searches are restricted to highly trained trackers. With no body or evidence, disturbing theories emerged. Could he have simply wandered off and succumbed to the elements? Park officials say it's the most probable explanation, but it begs the question, where are his remains? The Smoky Mountains are teeming with wildlife that would have scattered them, but it's statistically strange for not a single bone or piece of clothing to ever be found. Was he attacked by a bear? It's possible, but experienced trackers found no evidence of a bear drag, no blood, and no torn clothing. A more sinister theory, one his family believed, was abduction. This idea was given terrifying weight when another family, the Keys, reported hearing a sickening scream about 7 miles away that same afternoon. Shortly after, they saw a large, rough-looking man moving quickly through the woods, seemingly carrying something on his shoulder. Was it a coincidence, or did they witness the abduction of Dennis Martin? The FBI investigated, but the lead went nowhere. Years later, a ginseng hunter came forward, claiming he'd stumbled upon the skeletal remains of a small child in a remote part of the park not long after the disappearance. He said he kept quiet for over a decade, fearing prosecution for illegal harvesting. When he finally led authorities to the area, an extensive search turned up nothing. If a child can vanish in a moment, right in front of his own family, what hope is there for anyone? The wilderness doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about age or experience. Sometimes, it seems to choose its victims with terrifying randomness, swallowing even those who, like Paul Fugate, spent their lives mastering its challenges. This brings us to another expert, a man who possessed all the skills to survive, yet vanished just the same. Case 3. Randy Morganson, the ghost of the High Sierra. Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks are a land of giants. Giant trees, giant mountains, and a sprawling, lonely backcountry. It was the workplace and lifelong passion of Randy Morganson. In 1996, at age 54, Randy wasn't just a park ranger. He was a legend. With 27 years of service, he was one of the most experienced backcountry rangers in the entire system, a man who knew the High Sierra wilderness better than almost anyone. But that summer, Randy, a poetic and complicated soul, was in a tough spot. He and his wife were going through a painful separation, and the personal turmoil was weighing on him. On July 21, 1996, Randy headed out from his remote cabin for a standard multi-day patrol, leaving a note saying he'd be back in a few days. He was scheduled to check in by radio on July 24th. The call never came. For a ranger as reliable as Randy, this was an immediate red flag. What followed was a massive, emotionally charged search for one of their own. Nearly 100 people, helicopters, and dog teams scoured an 80-square-mile area. They knew Randy's habits, his favorite spots, and how he moved through the land. But heavy rains had washed away any tracks, and after 7 grueling days, they found nothing. The search was called off, and Randy Morganson was presumed lost to the vast wilderness he loved. For 5 years, the wilderness held its secret. Then, in July 2001, a trail crew working off-trail stumbled upon a tattered piece of a ranger's uniform shirt. Nearby, they found a weathered backpack and, partially submerged in a creek, a hiking boot with a human leg bone inside. Dental records confirmed it. They had found Randy Morganson. The official conclusion was a tragic accident. Investigators believe he fell through a snow bridge while crossing a creek, broke his leg, and was swept away by the water, his body hidden by rocks and ice for all those years. It was a sad, but seemingly clear, end to the story. But then searchers found one more thing. His park-issued radio, resting on top of a waterfall, switched to the on position. Why hadn't he called for help? For a man with his unmatched experience to be taken by an accident in his own territory, so completely that it took 5 years to find him, remains a haunting puzzle. The questions in these cases are endless, and they are the kind of mysteries we explore here every week. The void of information left behind by the disappearances of Paul Fugate, Dennis Martin, and Randy Morganson is profoundly unsettling. If you find yourself captivated by the unexplained and want to explore more cases that defy easy answers, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way, you won't miss our next investigation into the strange and the unknown. So what connects these cases? It's not just that they happen in national parks. Thousands of people get lost in parks every year, and most are found. The common thread here is the void, the absolute, deafening silence of zero evidence, or evidence that only creates more questions. This is what separates these disappearances from a typical search and rescue mission, and it's what makes them so terrifying. In most cases where someone has an accident, something is eventually found. A boot stuck in the mud, a faded backpack. Human beings leave traces. Our gear is durable. It can survive for decades. The complete absence of any physical evidence in cases like Paul Fugate's is a statistical anomaly. It's so unusual that it has led people to look for explanations beyond the conventional. Some researchers talk about something called the Oz factor. It's not a scientific term, but a way to describe a peculiar sensation people report during strange experiences in the wild. A feeling of unreality, as if the world suddenly became muted or different. It speaks to the feeling that a person didn't just get lost in the woods, but that they somehow stepped out of our reality. While it's purely speculative, the concept captures the eerie nature of these disappearances. Of course, we have to consider the rational explanations. Could these individuals have fallen into hidden crevasses or undiscovered caves? Absolutely. And there is the dark possibility of human intervention. A chance encounter with a dangerous person in a remote location, a perpetrator skilled enough to remove a person and all their belongings from a vast wilderness without a single clue. In the case of Paul Fugate, this seems to be the most logical, if horrifying, conclusion. But for every rational explanation, there's a nagging counter-question. Why no footprints? Why no scent for the dogs? Why was no gear ever recovered? This is the void. It's the gap between logical inference and the stark, empty reality of the case file. It's what allows our minds to wander into darker, stranger territories. Because when all logical explanations fail to fit the facts, what we are left with is pure, unresolved mystery. The stories of Paul Fugate, Dennis Martin, and Randy Morganson are more than just missing person cases. They are modern wilderness ghost stories. They represent the ultimate paradox, the guardians of the wild, an innocent child at play, and an experienced adventurer, all consumed by the very places they loved or were meant to be safe in. Their disappearances serve as a haunting reminder that our national parks, these vast cathedrals of nature, are not just places of beauty. They are ancient, powerful, and indifferent. They hold deep secrets, and sometimes, those secrets are the people we lose to them. For the families of the missing, the search for answers never truly ends. Every passing year is another year without closure, haunted by unanswered questions. And for the rest of us, their stories serve as a profound and chilling lesson. They remind us that no matter how much we map, study, or think we know, the wilderness is, and always will be, wild. It operates by its own rules, and it doesn't always share them. And sometimes, it keeps its secrets forever. What do you think happened to Ranger Paul Fugate? Was it a calculated act of foul play, a freak accident that defied all odds, or something stranger still? Share your theories in the comments below. These conversations keep the stories alive, and for those who have vanished, being remembered is the only form of return they may ever have.